Headphones.com, the sponsor of today's video, sent this out for a review. DCA had nothing to do with this review, and as always, all thoughts and opinions are my own. Hey, what's up? This is the DCA E3. There's been a lot of hype about this headphone. Today, I'm gonna answer if it's worth the hype. At 455 grams, this is actually a bit heavier than most DCA headphones. The design, however, is typical DCA. It's satisfyingly over-engineered and minimal. The good decisions consist of the ear-shaped pads, which are huge and will accommodate most people, the suspension strap, which you'll also see on headphones like their Stealth, the foldable ear yoke design, which I am a huge fan of, and one of the top cables in the industry. The bad design decisions are glued pads, which is a big L, and a notable lack of padding. Given the extra weight of this headphone, it is a noticeable listening experience on your head. Now, the internals, a big focus of this headphone is implementing some of their cool higher end technology. They call it the AMTS, which stands for Acoustic Metamaterial Tuning System. This is a very fancy way of describing kind of a waveguide, a diffusion control, and a resonator all in one. They have more information on the website if you're curious about it. Yeah, it's a cool piece of tech, and apparently it works, but it's also from their higher end headphones like their Stealth. On the face of the cups, you see some returning designs with the hexagonal patterning. We've seen this a lot with Dan Clark, and then the Gorilla Glass on the outside, which I'm assuming is just for aesthetics. I haven't seen any material as to how this actually affects the sound, so I just think it's for aesthetics. Personally, I much prefer the visual design of things like the Stealth. I'm assuming they did the Gorilla Glass to save a little bit of cost to get that price into the price category that they wanted to achieve with this. Now, for the price, this is well into the category of ultra high-end headphones, even though if you look at Dan Clark's website, they consider it like mid-range, but it's still $2,000. Now, granted, that's half of the Stealth price, which this is borrowing some technology from, but it's a very expensive closed-back headphone. But that's actually kind of funny because user reports so far have a lot of times stated that the E3 is better than the twice as expensive higher-end Stealth, which is hilarious. I'm sure Dan will be wiping his tears off with all this cash. So part of analyzing the sound here is going to be tackling some of these frequency response graphs that were provided by Headphones.com. And I want to give them a big shout out for sending out those graphs and thank them for sponsoring today's video. If you do want to check out the E3, you can find it down at Headphones.com. They deal in all sorts of high-end audio equipment, ranging from speakers to headphones to DACs and amps. Anything and everything high-end you could be interested in, you can find on their website. Their website features some awesome things like reward programs and great customer care if you have any questions. So check them out down below. Thanks a lot, Headphones.com, for sponsoring today's episode. Now, a lot of what seems to be driving the appreciation for the E3 is, one, the frequency response, which is very good, but also the seemingly increased dynamic range. Dynamic range, for a lot of people, including myself, has been a big sticking point for Dan Clark's headphones in the past. They've always kind of been the Achilles heel of the headphone, where it can have excellent frequency response, excellent detail reproduction, but when it comes to punch and real impact in more than just the bass, in all regions, they kind of lack a little bit. And the E3 is doing a great job at actually really fixing that issue and getting ahead of a lot of the previous headphones. Now, frequency response is also a big reason why people are really impressed with this headphone. In terms of measurement bros, this is pretty on point for a closed back headphone. As we've seen with companies like Sennheiser and Headphone, it seems extraordinarily difficult to get a headphone that measures well and sounds good as a closed back headphone. And this seems to be achieving both, which is awesome. And the combination of the improved dynamic range with the frequency response makes for an awesome subjective listening experience. The mid-range is probably my favorite area of this whole headphone, which is kind of surprising because that's not typically what I favor on closed back headphones. Now, not only is this my favorite region, but it also harbors probably the one actual fault with the sound quality, which we'll talk about in just a sec. Overall, mid-range is super tactile and really pleasing to listen to. Instruments sound unrestricted and unbridled without sounding harsh or unpleasant. The vocals actually seem a lot like a really good open back headphone. They're super solidified and solid in space, and they kind of free float there with a good separation between the background and them. And they have this like really great size capability that I typically associate more often with open back headphones than I do with closed ones. Tonality for this whole headphone is relatively neutral, and that is definitely maintained through the vocalist. When a headphone is so good like this, with resolution for days, with neutrality for days, you end up feeling like you are just listening to the person. You don't really feel like you're listening to the equipment. And while some people might prefer to feel like they're listening to an enhanced version, this is a bit more honest. but in a kind of a pleasing and enjoyable way. It seems unrestricted to the sound quality rather than tapering it down into its preference for sound output. Now, if you're looking at a frequency response graph, the one actual real frequency issue that I would define as an issue is about 3 to 4K. And occasionally you'll hit a female vocalist who it seems to be exclusive to, where it just becomes a problem again and again and again. So Amy Winehouse, Adele, Lana Del Rey, vocalists who have that same timbre and vocal characteristics, they trigger this issue again and again. It seems like a little bit of an overpressure there, and it comes across quite harsh. Don't like it. It almost sounds like a slight resonance in that 3 to 4 region. I'm not saying it is a resonance, but it kind of mimics a resonance. Now, while those artists are able to trigger this issue repeatedly for me, outside of those artists, I almost never have an issue with this region. So most male vocalists, even most female vocalists, don't really have that same timbre range. And, you know, it kind of is almost exclusive to those types of artists in terms of listening impressions. So it is an issue, but it's fairly contained. Now, bass is an area where dynamics are massively important. You can have excellent bass detail and fluctuation and capability and speed and all that fun stuff, but if you don't have impactfulness behind the bass, it kind of just hits a little flat. And a lot of previous ones, unless you push a ton of power through them, kind of sound pretty flat. But this one sounds actually pretty great. The bass quality is just absolutely off the chain good. It's so fantastic for quality, but the overall headphone is really balanced and neutral sounding. And because of that, you don't get a super like bass forward type of sound. While it can do really deep bass if the music is calling for that, it's not gonna turn every song into a super bass heavy track. It will just turn bass heavy tracks into what they're supposed to be, they're bass heavy tracks. And it will turn brighter, more mid-range and top-end focus into something that sounds a little bit dry in the bass because the song is dry in the bass. Choose wisely according to the type of music that you listen to and what the music demands and what you're looking for. Same thing goes with treble response. If you look at a frequency response graph, about 2K and up seems like it's on the brighter end of the preference curve until you hit kind of above 10,000 hertz. But between 2 and 10,000 hertz, it's kind of on the top end. This area sounds clear and crisp rather than shiny, sharp, or glassy. So the treble here, I think, is actually really well done for a crystal clear and defined presentation and not a bright one. Though I will say that users who classically prefer warm sound will not appreciate this as much as a warmer headphone. Now, details are extremely natural. There is a speed and frequency response that certain headphones achieve where the detail feels effortless and not seemingly achieved by an ultra bright frequency response. So some of the Headphone headphones have a really bright frequency response and they seem really detailed because of it. But when you actually get down into the mid-range of the bass response and you're looking at those details, they kind of fall a little bit flat. This is not that. It's just purely a fast driver. Is it the most detailed headphone out there? No, but for the price range, given its other features, and given how it achieves its detail, I think it's actually fairly competent here, and I like it. Sound staging, again, quality over quantity here. If you're looking for the widest out there, things like HC820 and things like Z1R are wider, though they're not nearly tuned as well. The tuning of this is far superior to even a headphone that I really like, that Sony Z1R. Though the bass response and sound staging are superior on that headphone, pretty much everything else goes to the E3. And so in terms of sound staging, you get a pretty surrounding delivery for your sound staging. It doesn't have a super strong feature. And most importantly, something that I like a lot is that sounds don't sound small. They sound relatively intimate. It doesn't quite achieve a larger than your head style delivery, but I think that why a lot of users are reporting that the sound staging is actually really good is because the layering and imaging specificity within the soundstage is so excellent. It really does provide a very clear picture for its sound staging. And that I think is more impressive than just listening to like a hollow room like the HC20 sounds like. Okay, so a totally unfair question. Does this bridge the gap between closed back and open backs, right? It's really, really good. And in a lot of ways, it performs like an open back, but does it keep up with open back headphones? And I would say it's really close, but not quite. I think that open back headphones are still superior for certain things. And while they haven't fixed every issue, in terms of bridging that gap, this is probably the best example that I've seen so far. So I'm pretty impressed. So is the hype worth it? Well, it depends, right? As usual, if you're into extremes of sound staging or bass response, or warmness, there are other headphones out there. If you're into a different style or build than what this offers, then yeah, of course, this isn't going to be that groundbreaking for you. But people who are looking for precision, neutrality, detail in a closed back headphone, I think this is the best example yet. And I think that those people will be very happy. So for some users, absolutely worth the hype. For others, not going to be your thing, but that's totally okay. That's what audio is all about. All right. See you guys next time.